Thank you. That list of challenges is one that I think could be read in any small, medium, or large size jurisdiction from British Columbia all the way out to Newfoundland, but it's certainly present here in the nation's capital, and means that we in the Ottawa Police Service, myself as the office holder of Chief of Police, have to recognize that as one of our top, if not the top issue. In fact, I will very comfortably say here and now, as I have in the past, public trust, I believe, is the mission of policing, more so than public safety. Without the trust and confidence of the public, they won't call us, they won't participate as witnesses, they will not come to court, they will not police their own neighborhoods in terms of informal community engagement around advancing community safety and well-being. Ultimately, they won't seek to join this police service. So if we don't have the trust and confidence of all Ottawans, and particularly those who are often most marginalized, victimized, and usually racialized in terms of Indigenous and Black, Brown, and other Asian communities, then we're going to struggle. That said, I have had in my 365 days in office a huge amount, even in these most difficult and recent days, a huge amount of in-reach from community leaders from across the spectrum, all geographies and all demographies, saying we want better policing, but we want the Ottawa Police Service to succeed. We want better from you, Chief, and you're doing well, but we want you to succeed, and we're going to work with you. And that's the most important thing for me in the equation. While trust has been eroded, it has not been eliminated, and we have great partners and leaders in the community who will hold us to account, but also hold us up and help us to move forward.
There is a plan?
Is there
a task force, a report?
No, none of the above.
Okay.
What we have is committed resources and a committed set of priorities. The board that hired me had already established its priorities of modernizing the police service, advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion, advancing community policing, and improving the health and wellness of our members. I believe those priorities are the right priorities for today and for tomorrow. They were gleaned from canvassing the community at large and our membership at large, and I think they're as relevant on day one as they are on day 366 for me. The plan is to resource those areas, and that means putting people, money, time, and focus to advance those areas. So, for instance, coming out of the events of the last several weeks, we have committed ourselves to significant investment in addressing how we provide mental health services, not just as a police service, but more broadly across civil society. For instance, we have put more people and money into improving our members' health and wellness. We have doubled the number of neighborhood resource teams and expanded that from, and in the next year we'll expand that from the urban downtown into the suburban and rural areas of the city. So if it's a priority, we need to resource it as such. And I think the priorities that were articulated by the board are the ones that address the core issues of public trust and confidence and effective, progressive, equitable policing.
Okay. You mentioned mental health, and that's one of the issues I wanted to raise, and how police can better deal with people in our community who come into contact with members of the Ottawa Police Service, residents who are suffering from a mental health crisis. There's this motion at our City Council meeting today, in fact, that calls for the creation of, quote, a non-police-led response to calls which do not involve weapons or violence, such as those individuals experiencing mental health crisis or drug addiction. What do you think about that proposal?
I think it's an excellent proposal. If you read through the entire document, you'll see that it references where we should spend most of our time and efforts as civil society, which is actually preventing people from going into crisis in the first place. The less people that are in crisis, the less need to call police, fire, ambulance, to take up scarce hospital resources and hospital beds, long-term incarceration within the healthcare system. All those things we're trying to avoid. So a proper mental health strategy for this city under the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan would have very little, if anything, to do with the police service. We do know that people will reach crisis no matter what our best efforts are, and when there is an element of violence or criminality, there will be a necessary element of police response to that. But we should do our best to reduce those incidents as much as possible, and then prepare the police officers as much as possible to be properly trained, equipped, and supported by other avenues that currently don't exist to be able to fulfill their shrinking portion of that response. So I'm very much in favor of that. What I'm not in favor of is any concept of defunding the police and taking that money away at some arbitrary number and handing it over to some other group of people who are not currently in place to provide a 24/7, 365 capability for the largest municipality in Canada.
Okay. This is something I've wanted to ask you for quite some time, and I'm asking it because I think this is something a lot of people they're talking about. I've had conversations with listeners about it on the air. I've had conversations in my own social circle. If I'm having these conversations, I know other people are. Is there something, Chief, about being a police officer that attracts young men who are basically filled with testosterone? They want to get out there and they want to kick ass and take names. Do police services, generally speaking, do they have a recruitment problem or a screening problem, that there are people being hired as police officers who really don't have any business being police officers?
No, listen, it's an important conversation. It's certainly one that police leaders and frontline officers have across the board. Let me put it into context. Whether it's the police, it's the military, it's the firefighters, paramedics, law firms, big consulting firms, there's a certain type of person that gets drawn to a certain type of activity. They can be male or female, it doesn't really matter. But if it's high action, high pressure, high power types positions, it doesn't exist just in policing. So let's put that into context. I will tell you, policing is one of the most important professions in Canada and in a functioning democracy. It is one of the toughest jobs anywhere in the world, and particularly in the last 10 years, particularly this year. It is a very, very difficult job, physically, emotionally, psychologically. I'm a man of faith, spiritually, demanding jobs. And when you do it for not just years, but decades, even the best person in the world, the best soul in the world on day one will never be the same on day 2 or day 30 years and 1 day. That's the reality. So the need for ongoing mental health and wellness, which is one of the board's priorities, the need for ongoing training and development, particularly as it relates to equity, diversity, and inclusion. These are priorities for the health and wellness of our police service, our members, and for their ability to go out and keep the community safe. The reality is, even with all the angst and anger around policing locally and internationally, the Ottawa Police Service is still an employee of choice. We have record numbers of applicants in the year 2020 who want to join the Ottawa Police Service, who want to become police members. We have record numbers of people wanting to join us at the executive ranks. So despite all of what we're hearing around the kitchen tables and the journalistic tables, people still see policing as an invaluable profession, as a valuable source of employment, and a place where they want to spend the majority of their working life. The diversity of our applicants has gone up significantly. We've hired to date 79 officers. Over 35% are female. Over 35% are from racialized communities. We have 2 Indigenous members, which is double the rate that we had in the previous year. So we're making progress across all these fronts, while we're also making changes to make this profession and this organization better.
Well, let me ask you, because the Ottawa Police Service is recruiting all the time.
That's correct.
What kind of person, what characteristics makes a good police officer, Chief?
Yeah, well,
what are you looking for?
Well, I'll tell you, the 11 people that we just approved, the command and I just approved to hire, every single one of them came in with some sort of post-secondary education, from college all the way through master's. The average age is in the range of 28 to 30. We had some north of that, and we had some south of that, but the average age tends to be in that range. They have previous life experience, which includes work experience. Every single one of them, of the 79 that I've hired in my time, and I suspect before that, had extensive volunteer experience. Their voluntary and education experience range from sociology, criminology, social services. They have volunteered at Boys and Girls Clubs, the Salvation Army, the shelters down in the market area. Every single one of them are required to demonstrate a track record of continuous improvement, continuous education, and volunteerism, and yes, some significant and relevant work experience or life experience.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Ottawa's local shops, restaurants, and services are woven into the fabric of our city. We can all help them during these challenging times. Order from them online, purchase gift certificates to use later, order meals for takeout or delivery, Send them messages of support on social media. Please do it today. Learn how at ottawa.ca/buylocal.
After a night out with your friends, there's always options for getting home safely. You could call your BFF, your mom or dad, whoever you can count on for a safe ride home. You could call your favorite cab company or 1-888 taxi guy. Or you could use the Arrive Alive smartphone app to help you choose your ride. Be it a friend, transit, or taxi, getting home safely is app easy. Now available for iOS and Android devices. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
I am Harriet Clooney, chef here in Ottawa and host of Scrap Cookings. Join me each week and I will show you how to reduce your food waste and save a bit of money. Hope to see you soon.
This is Rogers TV.
Municipal de la Ville d'Ottawa. Welcome to Ottawa City Council meeting for October 28th, 2020. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, excuse me, very much. Merci beaucoup. A few reminders for today's meetings. Members of council and staff, please stay on mute at all times unless called upon to speak. Members of council, if you wish to speak to an item, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, *9 if you're on the phone. And this meeting will be broadcast on Rogers Cable 22 et aussi en français en 23. And members and staff are asked to position their cameras so that their faces are centered as close to the top of the frame as possible. And phone-in participants, please do not put the phone on hold. Roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Suds.
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Egoy.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseil Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Ici.
Conseil Cloutier.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès-verbaux pour le 14 octobre for the meeting of October 14th. Carried. Communications as presented. In consultation with the Medical Officer of Health and Chair Egli, it was agreed that Dr. Etches, given the workload that she's involved with, will be at every second meeting. Unless an urgent issue comes up, then she'll come to the next meeting, and she'll also be available next week at the Ottawa Board of Health. So we thank Dr. Etches for her long hours that she's been putting in, and we appreciate members of council have specific issues they can raise with Councillor Eglai or the medical officer of health or her team. And we look forward to welcoming not Dr. Eglai, I'm sorry, I gave you a promotion there, Keith, Dr. Etches to the next council meeting. Regrets, Councillor Rick Shirelli has declined coming to the meeting. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant de présentation de rapport. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for making me a doctor for a minute anyway. That Built Heritage Subcommittee Report 16, Community and Protective Services Committee Report 14, Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Report 11, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries, and Motions for the period ending October 23rd, 2020, and Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act, explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of October the 14th, 2020, be received and considered.
On the motion, carried. Adopté. First item is City Clerk, Greffier Municipal, status update, council inquiries and motions for the period ending October 23rd, 2020. Rapport de situation received. Committee report. Committee reports, rapport des comités, Built Heritage Subcommittee Report number 16, rapport numéro 16 de sous-comité de patrimoine bâti, additions to the Heritage Registry, Centertown Heritage Study. Any comments on that? Carried. We're just going through the consent agenda as a reminder. If people want to hold something, we'll hold it and then we'll come back. Ontario Heritage Act proposed regulations pursuant to Bill 108, Loi sur le patrimoine de l'Ontario. Comments, questions? Carried. Very busy committee, Councillor King. You've got lots on your plate there. Congratulations. Item number 4, Ottawa Paramedic Service. I know Councillor Suds would like to offer comments. We'll come back to that. Item number 5, letter to request restricting residential rental evictions during pandemic. There's a replacement motion, so we'll come back to that as well. Item number 6, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Interim Report. With the amendment from Councillor McKenney, I believe, and Councillor Kavanagh. Carried? Adopted?
Carried.
Thank you. Standing Committee on Environment, Protection, Water and Waste Management, Report number 11, Rapport numéro 11 du Comité de l'Environnement, Climate Master Change Energy Evolution, Ottawa's Community Energy Transition Strategy Final Report.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask some questions on that?
Yep. Sure, we'll come back to that. Councillor Meehan. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda at this time? See no hands on the bulk consent agenda as presented. Carried?
Carried.
Okay, so we'll go back to the first items that were held. And the first one, Ottawa Paramedic Service 2019 Annual Report. Councillor Suds, Chair of Community and Protective Services, please.
Apologies, still muted there. Haven't had that coffee yet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to hold this item today really because of the serious issues that were highlighted both in the annual report, but also discussed at length at committee. And this, I know, is not a new issue, and many of my colleagues around the table can attest to this going on before this term of council. However,
sorry, Councillor Suds. Sorry, your line, I don't know if others are having difficulty hearing. It's crackling up a little bit, so we're just going to see if the Deputy Clerk can help you out there.
Okay.
Maybe if you turn the monitor
Maybe
off.
I'll turn my video off.
Okay. Let's try it now.
We can hear it quite well over here, ma'am.
Okay, I'll go again here. So I was just saying, I know that this isn't a new issue. Many of my colleagues can attest this has been going on for quite a while prior to this term, but the increase in offload delays have continued at an alarming rate. So many will remember this report when it was coming to committee was first deferred as we requested that local area hospital CEOs attend committee and provide information to committee on next steps that they would take to minimize offload delays. So at committee, we heard from GM De Monte as well as Chief Poirier talk about the impacts of offload delay to our residents and to the city. For families, this can mean and has meant that a child with a broken leg, for example, could be waiting for up to an hour for a paramedic to respond. For our city, it has meant a loss of 64 FTEs at an annual cost of $7.7 million last year. And for our paramedics, it means spending over 53,000 hours in offload delay instead of out in the community. So I'm happy this has been an all-hands-on-deck approach to try to make progress on this issue. The province, including Premier Ford and Minister Elliott, have been very receptive on the need to tackle the issue. Some of you may recall the mayor and I sent a letter to the province back in September outlining our serious concerns with offload delays. And I know the mayor also raised the issue directly again with the premier when they spoke in September on 2 separate occasions at their meetings. This is in addition to the many meetings that we've had with the leadership of the local area hospitals asking for immediate steps to be taken. So at committee, we heard from the hospital CEOs that they need additional provincial funding for beds to make real progress on the issue, and that they believe that additional beds will lead to a reduction in offload delays. Earlier this week, on the weekend actually, the Civic Hospital and the province announced funding for 40 beds, as well as an expansion to the emergency department. So this is being put forward as a trial program that will be put in place to reduce offload delays, and the hospitals are committed to having this implemented in December of this year. Also, if the program is successful, they do look to expand it to other hospitals in our city, which of course we know is needed. The pilot program is being funded by the hospitals and the province, so not the city. Offload delays, as we know, are the responsibility of the hospitals. So I am cautiously optimistic on the progress that we are seeing. This problem, I know, has gone on for many years, and I'm sure it won't be solved overnight. But I believe this is a positive step. I'll continue to follow this and work on this issue with both GM De Monte and Chief Poirier to assess what we hope will be the positive impact of this pilot on offload delays. So I know it's a first step, but I know myself and I'm sure the mayor as well will continue to push for this progress to be made. And that is all, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Sudds. I know you've been working on this for some time, and I appreciate all of your efforts and that of all members of council, because this is a serious issue, both from a response time and the public's well-being. And you're correct, we've raised this a number of times with the Premier, and I know that there's going to be an announcement on Friday, hopefully that will deal with some of our challenges, and we thank the province very much for their cooperative approach. Conseiller Fleury has a question or comment, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Moi aussi, j'aimerais.
I also want to congratulate the committee chair for her great work and for bringing the hospital CEOs at the committee. I'd like to emphasize the professionalism of Mr. Poirier and Mr. De Monte to find a solution on a very complex issue, hyper-important issue. This being said, an announcement was made by the hospital last week regarding the impact of what was talked about at the committee. Mr. De Monte, could you explain us what the impact of what Dr. Love announced last week? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, Councillor, the information, we learned about this through the media. We haven't seen the details. I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Love from the Ottawa Hospital regarding the purpose of this program. It's a pilot project, like the chair said. I think it's a very good solution to this issue. We'll see what the results are. If they're positive, like we expect, we will ask this to be expanded to other hospitals, to the General and the Montfort Hospital, because there's more problems at the General than at the Civic. But I think it's a good beginning. We'll start with this pilot project, and we'll see what we'll get for the future. Mr. De Monte, last time we talked about the responsibility of councillors as a board of directors. Do you think that following this announcement, you can tell us what the board could do? Well, it's a first step. It's the first time, thanks to the work of the chair and your work, that we were able to obtain a result after so many years. Thanks to the cooperation of the 3 CEOs. It's only a beginning. I'm not really in a position to say any more than that. We have to see the results. We'll wait till December, and then we'll assess the performance and the result, and then we can report back to you early next year if there are any positive impacts. As a comment, Mr. Mayor, I think that your efforts and the committee's efforts and the city's efforts regarding the paramedics are laudable. I think it's a first step indeed. And I believe that shows how much political pressure there was on this issue. It's important to mention it. It's not the ultimate solution, though. We have to remember that our responsibility is when someone calls 911 for an ambulance service, we must be able to answer that call very effectively. So it's a very good first step, but I don't think we shall claim victory right now following this announcement. It's only a first step, but there should be very many more to come. So once again, congratulations, Councillor Sudds, Mr. Mayor, and for having had the guts and putting the pressure on to get this accomplished. But it's not all success yet, though. There will be more steps to come. You're right, Councillor. I agree.
This is probably not the first step, but the second significant step, because many years ago, as you know, the province agreed to our request to have offload nurses available. Obviously, there were too few, and it did not solve the problem because we just had too many code zeros. And so this is the next significant step. And as Councillor Sudds and Councillor Fleury have both said, we appreciate the province intervening, because this was really a matter of life and death. When someone calls 911, you expect a reasonable time frame for someone to come with a paramedic unit to help yourself or a loved one. And this was becoming increasingly more difficult with a growing population and an aging population. So I think the initiative by the province and the work of the hospital is a good step forward, but of course we'll monitor the results, and then we have to expand it. Obviously there's more than one hospital in the city to ensure all regions of the city are treated equitably. So appreciate the comments, and Councillor Sudds, thank you for your leadership on this. On the report, received? Received? And I think, Councillor Deans, you were dealing with this back at CPS many years ago, so we're building on what you started a while ago. This has been a long journey, and I appreciate everyone's support. It's so important that we get this right. Next is letter to request restricting residential rental evictions during pandemic. Councillor Moffat and Leeper have a replacement motion. So Councillor Moffat, if you'd like to introduce your replacement motion and comment on it, and then we'll open it up to other members of council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor McKenney for your work on this and your motion. This wouldn't necessarily be a replacement motion were it not for procedural matters that require it to be a replacement motion. It's generally a friendly amendment from previous discussions with Councillor McKenney. I'll just read it out. Be resolved that the Community Protection Services Committee recommendation be replaced with the following amended resolution: that Council direct Mayor Watson to write to Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, requesting that the provincial government provide sufficient funding so that no tenant in Ottawa would be evicted for households who cannot pay their rents because of loss of income resulting from the COVID-19 crisis. B, as individuals on CERB transition to the Enhanced Employment Insurance Program, that the provincial government restore the treatment of those transitioning to EI and also in receipt of public assistance so that the full clawback of dollar for dollar social assistance benefits does not take place while recipients are receiving the EI under the Canada Recovery Benefit, Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, or the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit due to COVID-19 related job loss. And C, failing the adoption of the measures stated in A and B, that the provincial government restrict residential rental evictions due to tenants' inability to pay their rent due to COVID-19 related income losses, and maintain that moratorium on such evictions until the COVID-19 pandemic is effectively contained. Essentially, this merely clarifies a bit more and makes sure that the focus is where it belongs, this as per what Councillor McKenney was striving for at committee. And thank you to Councillor Leeper for seconding.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to this item? Okay, on the motion by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Leeper. Carried. Adopté.
Carried.
Thank you. Next item that's been held is Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, report number 11. Councillor Caroline Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. My questions are actually really quite simple. I think funding onto the climate emergency was a very good step for this council. And while I do support many of the projects that we are moving to fund as a result of this motion, I'm just wondering, $57.4 billion is that's an awful lot of money. Like, it's almost the equivalent of 14 city budgets. So my question simply is, how realistic is it, that we could fulfill this commitment as much as we need it going forward? I would just like, the public needs to know, is this realistic for us? Can we actually do this?
So who would you like that? Is this Mr. Willis?
Mr. Willis, maybe you,
or
Mr. Mayor, or
Marilyn Journo?
Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Yes, we totally understand that this is a huge ask, $58 billion over the life of the plan. And we realize that we need funding from other levels of government to support us in being successful in this plan. And so that is where we're going to be focusing our efforts, is to ensure that we get that funding to apply to all of the various programs like FCM to support us in our endeavors. It's also community-wide, not corporate. The plan is a community-wide plan, so this $58 billion is not just from the municipality, it is also in the community. So it will take efforts from all levels of government as well as the private and public sector to accomplish this plan.
Councillor Meehan?
Thanks, sorry. I can understand that. But realistically, we need $3 billion to build phase 3 of LRT to Barrhaven. And we're told that that's that, is going to be really challenging. So looking at this $57.4 billion, excuse me for being a little bit skeptical of when that's going to actually happen.
Mayor, yes, with using the hydro dividend funds as recommended in this report, we're already using that money to apply for various funding. There will be funds coming out as a result of the stimulus program, and certainly the higher levels of government have indicated that there will be an emphasis on the green economy recovery. And so we are going to be very well positioned to apply for that funding. And indeed, we already have applied for a lot of that funding. And that will help us ensure success towards accomplishing our goals in this plan.
And how long do you envision that might take?
This is a 30-year plan, but we've already started applying for funds as we speak. So those applications are already in, and we will continue to apply for additional funding as those programs become available.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. J'ai deux questions.
I have two questions, and then I'll have some comments. In the past, Mr. Willis, I was a member of that working group too, and you talked about some policies that should be changed at the provincial and federal level. You actually talked about the building code at the national level. How do you see the program as such and its priorities? How are we developing a program for applying for amendments to some programs? Oh. There are some phases. It's important that we use the federal and provincial programs for the community. But can you be more specific? For instance, the example of the National Building Code. I don't know if Mr. Willis is available, but he had talked to me about this in the past, that some basic policies such as this one that could have a global influence on our plan. Are we developing a plan ourselves? An information plan for the provincial and federal government on these elements, on these considerations that could have an impact on our results? Well, if we're working with other Canadian municipalities, Toronto, Edmonton, and Halifax, and we're working together, we're not the only ones that are aiming for these objectives. Okay, my second question, Mr. Mayor, is Mr. Manconi. When we look at the plan, we're saying that a bus can last 14 or 15 years. That's what Mr. Manconi said in the past. That would mean that in the plan, the last year that we will buy a new bus, non-electric bus, would be non-fuel, and that would be in 2025. So you'll have major decisions to make in the upcoming years. Also with Paratranspo, it's decisions will have to be made. That's a plan that will have an influence on all city programs. It will have an impact on your operations too. I'd like to have an idea of your perspectives. How can we reach these goals, especially in your services, in your department? As I explained at the Transit Committee, without the money, we can't do anything with the bus. We did talk to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and they announced that they would be giving money to municipalities wanting to change for zero-emission buses. But there are three big things. The federal government must change the rule they must give the money for the difference on operations and maintenance, and also there must be an agreement saying that it's for the lifetime of the bus.
There's an opportunity with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, but without money, we can't move to an aggressive change out of our diesel buses. We have the pilot that's rolling out that I've given you the update on. We've been clear with the folks from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. The federal government has to come back with 3 conditions that the city manager and I and the treasurer articulated to them, and Bryce from Hydro Ottawa. They have to get rid of the stacking rules, otherwise the funding model won't work. They have to give us the delta on operations and maintenance, and they have to commit to a long-term, irrespective of what government is in power, a deal, an arrangement. Otherwise, you can get yourself caught in the situation you did with the hybrid, where the operations and maintenance was killing you on that technology. So we're very optimistic with what the Canada Infrastructure Bank has put forward. I commend the federal government. They put forward the best funding plan that I've seen out there that speaks to the challenges. And it's not technology, it's money. It's the $400,000 delta per bus. It's the transition costs on operations and maintenance, everything from training to equipment fit up, no different than when you acquired the double-decker buses. And it's a commitment that secures future councils that the funding is there. And the payback on the savings get reinvested back to the infrastructure bank for their loan. So the treasurer, the city manager, myself, and the CEO of Hydro Ottawa met with them. We like what we saw. We were very clear. Those are the 3 conditions that I changed with the Transit Commission. I know many councillors, Councillor Menard, Councillor McKinney, are all asking me when. You need the money. With the money, if you want to achieve any of those targets, and it needs to move quickly, we do have a fulsome report coming to you at the end of next year with the treasurer in terms of what that funding gap would look like. And the layer of complexity is now COVID and what's happening in terms of ridership and the delta on that. So budget needs to come together. We have a great plan that we're going to be tabling. And then the Canada Infrastructure Bank, if that comes to fruition with those 3 conditions, we're on a path to success. Having said that, I think council needs to be clear on it is zero-emission buses, and you're not going to entertain things such as CNG and other alternative technologies, hydrogen, which are around the corner. All that is coming to you in our report at the end of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. So my general comment will be the following, Mr. Mayors. I am hopeful that this plan will set a new course. I see a lot of hurdles, as you would have heard from the last question. We have to have a game plan in terms of what is our ask provincially and federally, and what policies need to change, from transportation to procurement to building code and so on and so forth. And that still, in my perspective, needs to be fleshed out beyond what we can do as a city. I think the city has.
I think someone else is on. Put yourself on mute, please.
I think the city is doing the right thing. I want to congratulate Councillor Moffitt and the entire team at the city for bringing forward this important plan. I also want to give kudos to the former chair, David Trinashenko, and the team who began the work a while back. I want you to know also that it needs to be a vertical and a horizontal effort within the administration. And I want to assure you that the conversations with Ottawa Community Housing have certainly progressed tremendously. All of our new builds are passive house standards, and obviously we're continuing conversations with Hydro Ottawa in terms of various retrofit programs and district energy solutions. So I want to see all the partners at the city, including OCH and others, taking this effort collectively. I also want to finally on this point is every day the city invests in infrastructure or on procurement, we make decisions. And there's an opportunity now that this plan will be approved to shift some of the way we do business and some of the way, not invest less, invest more, but invest in ways that makes our city more resilient and are in line with the plan. So I applaud the effort. It's a journey that's beginning, and council will need to stay hyper-focused. In the same way...
wrap up, Councillor, please. Sorry, you've gone over.
Oui. Monsieur Maire.
Merci. Councillor Menard, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to also say this is a good plan. It's a detailed plan. It's supported by many community allies and industry, including Ecology Ottawa, Cafes, Enviro Center, OREC, the Ottawa Community Foundation, Windmill Developments, Ottawa Green Building Council, Ottawa Biogas, Enbridge, GOBA, Envari, Portage Power, and Hydro One. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Chair Moffat on this and the whole committee to get this done. I think it was important to see council come together and pass the climate emergency motion in the spring of 2019. It's a huge level, or it affects us all. And as the recent climate projections for the NCR show, these effects are going to be more extreme in the future. And together we're committing to ambitious climate targets right now. Net zero emissions for the corporation by 2040 and for the community by 2050. And that plan really lays out how we can get there. There are items, to Councillor Meehan's question, within Energy Evolution that will begin to save us money almost immediately. And there are returns on investment here. And so as you start to achieve those savings, one model that other cities have implemented is you roll those savings back into other emission-reducing activities that also have a return on investment. So think about building retrofits in a 5 to 7 year return, transportation changes where you save on your operational costs, energy generation that we start to do through ROPEC and other areas, local energy generation. So there's still a lot of work to do. And we need to consider some of the creative ways of financing this type of investment. But it is an investment. It does show savings at the end of this. And we need to start with those savings as soon as possible to integrate that climate lens throughout our transportation, our land use decisions. So this plan's not an end. It's a strong beginning. And I commend staff in the Applied Department who've worked so hard at providing us with a robust model and direction. And now it's really our time to take this forward. Back to you, Mayor.
Merci, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate Councillor Moffat on putting together a really good roadmap to show us what it will cost if we want to do all the things that people are talking about us doing, which are listed in here. I'd like to get some confirmation. Councilor Menard just rounded off a whole bunch of organizations that are supporting this. Do we have any verification of this? Because, no offense to Councilor Menard, but in the past, he's claimed support that hasn't been there. So, for example, Enbridge and Hydro One, have they actually written support of this plan? Written to us with that support?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. This type of activations, you should spell out what you're saying, because that shouldn't be said just let go. I don't just speak off the cuff and say that organizations are...
Sorry, Councillor. We have a few technical problems here. You're getting cut out all the time, as was Councillor Hubley. I think we're trying to fix that. In the interim, maybe Councillor Menard, you can take off video along with Councillor Hubley. See if that helps. Let's see if Councillor Hubley first, and then Councillor, if you could just take. Yeah, sorry. I think we're going to have to take a 2-minute recess because I'm told it's also impacting the YouTube channel. So if people can hold their thoughts for a couple of minutes, we'll be right back. We'll just take a quick recess. Thank you. Merci.
sound check. This is a sound check. Anybody there?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Councillor Ard, did you have a point of order? Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor, did you want to finish your comment? And then Councillor Menard had his hand up.
Sure. I believe Councillor Menard was looking for clarification of why I was asking if we have any, I'm using the word proof for lack of a better word, of the support of all the companies that Councillor Menard listed, such as Enbridge and Hydro One, and he's asking where I'm coming from with that question. And so while we're waiting for him to come back, it's the episode, if you will, that we went through over the Glebe BIA, saying that he had claimed their support, and they were saying they didn't support his motion. So I'm not calling into question his integrity here. I'm just asking if we're going to go ask the other levels of government for billions of dollars and putting on the public record that all these organizations support that request. I would like to know that we somehow closed that loop and got something in writing from them or something publicly stated to say that they all support that before we list them as part of that ask. That's my request. I'm happy to take it and have somebody email me the documents.
Okay, so Councillor,
to show the support.
So Councillor Menard, can you send the copies of the letters or correspondence to Councillor Hubley, please, or the clerk's office?
I'm gonna answer it. I'm gonna answer it when I talk.
Yeah, they're all there, and
okay.
They've all been presented at committee. I know Councillor Moffat will speak to it. I don't need to address Councillor.
Okay. So we'll just go to Councillor Brockington now, please.
Can I finish asking my questions, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, so the other thing I'd like to see on this is if we're voting to support this today, it is to acknowledge it as the roadmap. We are not making funding commitments today. That individual projects that will require tax dollars will come back to council separately. Is that correct? Is this just voting to say that this is a reasonable roadmap towards these things, that this is what we're going to do?
Ms. Charneau.
Mr. Mayor. Yes, so we have already started numerous of these projects. There are 13 of the projects of the 20 are actually city projects, and a lot of them are actually already underway. There are also future master plans that will be tying into the climate change, the energy evolution piece, and so future works will be coming out of those master plans as well. So we are actually well underway in moving forward with regards to a lot of these projects.
So you're confirming that you're already spending $57 billion or committing to $57 billion? That's news.
No, this is already within the purview of the city department. These projects, the energy evolution piece has been going on for the last 5 years, and we've been working with other operational departments and have been moving these projects forward within our existing budget envelope.
Acknowledge that. What I'm talking about is the $57 billion that is listed as the ask in this report. And before we go asking for that money, I'm trying to see, like, is this vote today giving you direction, Mr. Journal? You see this as your direction to go and ask for that money?
No, not at all. So right now, the direction is to have a 5-year strategic plan in how we're going to move forward, obtain funding, and move these projects forward. The $58 billion is not City of Ottawa dollars. This is across the community. So the City of Ottawa's piece of that $58 billion is significantly less. It's actually $7 billion in net present value over the 30-year plan. So the funding pieces will be coming through future master plans that will be coming to committee and council as those plans come clearer or come to their fruition. And also in our LRFP, so those master plans will be aligning with our long-range financial plans so that we can achieve our goals for the future funding.
Okay.
10 seconds, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, may I add a comment? Steve Kanalakis.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify that only the budgets that have been approved are going to be spent, or any money that we receive from other levels of government. So I just want to make that clear for council's comfort. There's a plan, but we only spend whatever council approves or whatever we receive from other levels of government. So council is in complete control of how this rolls out and what we spend. I just want to make that clear. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That answers my, or gives me a level of comfort that we're not about to embark on a spending spree. I appreciate the city manager's comments. So one last.
Sorry, Councillor, you're over your time. I've given you an extra 15 seconds, so we'll have to go on to the next speaker. Appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Brockington, and I think Councillor Hubli, Councillor Moffat could answer one of your original questions when he's on next. So Councillor Brockington and then Councillor Moffat, please. And Councillor Hubli, sorry, Councillor Hubli, your hand is still up there. You can't come back. Councillor Brockington?
I was going to go to the bottom of the list to come back to ask my last question.
No, you can do that at committee, but not at council. So Councillor Moffat, or Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning to everyone. I just want to continue on the line of questioning from Councillor Hubli because I think he underscores a point that at least some of my residents have been concerned about, and that's the price tag, because they don't understand how it's going to be financed over 30 years. And my understanding is we're going to rely on basically four sources. One is federal government will either fund or co-fund projects. The provincial government will fund or co-fund projects. The City of Ottawa, through our normal budgeting process, allocates money. And in future budgets, some of this money that would already be in those budgets are then going to address some of our climate action needs. That money is already going to be there. And then there's going to be, over the course of 30 years, net increases to projects that we have to prioritize to put into our budget. So I think our taxpayers need to have a better understanding that, yes, City of Ottawa will not be on the hook for $57 billion, but when you put that number in a report, people are concerned about how we're going to achieve that over the 30 years. So I just wanted to underscore that point, that there's legitimate concern out there. I understand how we're going to do that, and I appreciate the city manager's intervention now that staff are going to do what we approve, and we're going to be engaged every single year on those budgets. So this is a energy transition strategy, 4+ years in the making. Very happy to be here. We as a council took a bold step. We said that there is a climate emergency, and we declared that as such. I think this is the biggest threat that threatens future generations, and we have to make a bold stand now. And it's not just financial costs. There are social costs and geopolitical costs for future generations by doing nothing. So the costs far outweigh investments over the next 30 years if we don't do anything. I'm comforted by the fact that we will get an update every single year at the Environment Committee, and there'll be a refresh of the methodology every 5 years to make sure that we're on track, and we'll be actively engaged in that process. So that's how I have some comfort, knowing that there will be that ongoing oversight by the committee going forward. And I'll just make my last point, and that is, I'll repeat what I said at committee. I think once this is passed and we've got some time to let the dust settle, through the leadership of the chair of this committee, I do believe there needs to be a roadshow where a delegation of the City of Ottawa meets with local MPPs, MPs, AMO, FCM reps, and really take Ottawa's plan and inform our partners in the different levels of government where we are and where we're going and the type of partnerships we need to create in the coming years for this to be successful. Because if we can't do that, then we're not going to achieve our own targets here in Ottawa. So I know the chair opened that, was welcome to that at committee, and maybe, Scott, you can speak to that in a second, but I will be supporting this bold, ambitious plan, and I hope all of council does today as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Moffat, please, chair of the committee.
Thank you so much. I'll try to wrap up everything into my comments here because there's a lot of comments from a lot of different directions. First, obviously, as Marilyn Journeau just said, this is not something that we do alone. This is something that will be done by multiple parties. Now, I said it at committee. I said it before. I don't think the federal government should come up with a plan to deal with climate change. I think they should just fund the plan that we created. And other municipalities can look to us. I know Vancouver is working on a plan right now to bring forward very similar to what we've done right here. We are one of the first in Canada to bring forward a plan like this that meticulously details what's needed over the next 30 years to get to the goal that we set. Everyone set the goal. The goal setting is the easy part. Actually having the document that says how to get there is the part that's tougher, and it's more bold for councils to support that plan than just setting a target. Anyone can set a target. We do it all the time. But it's across the board as to how we get there. One of the biggest parts is transportation. If you look at General Motors alone, they have a plan to make sure every vehicle they produce is an electric vehicle. That right there puts us toward our goal. It's not something we do. It's something that's happening in the industry on its own. It's a private sector initiative, but it's happening, and it'll help us get to our goal that we've set forward in this plan. Just in terms of the support from the others, from the other groups, it's all available on the shared drive under the committee meeting in alphabetical order. The Canadian Renewable Energy Association, the Canada Green Building Council, the Canadian Biogas Association, Enbridge, Envari, EnviroCentre, GOBA, Hydro One, Hydro Ottawa, JL Richards, NCC, OREC, Ottawa Board of Trade, Ottawa Community Foundation, Portage Power, Treasury Board, and Windmill Developments. All letters, all available, all right there for the agenda at committee last week. It's all itemized and available to be read. And to Councillor Brockington's point, absolutely, we have to work with our other levels of government. And the sooner we do that, the sooner we meet with them and talk to them about these plans and how they can be a part of our plans, then the more likely we're going to find success. Just thank Councillor Menard. You know, he's bang on when he mentioned these letters of support and the importance of those. So appreciate his work as the vice chair, his advocacy over the last couple of years, and of course, as Councillor Fleury mentioned, my predecessor, Councillor Chernishenko, getting us down this path. I know Councillor Nussbaum and Councillor Brockington were also on a sponsors group earlier on with myself and David that got us to this point. And staff, we're not here. There's no report without the staff that get this job done. You heard from Marilyn today, Steve Willis, of course, but really Andrea Flowers, Jen Brown. Jen Brown was phenomenal at committee and during the technical briefing. Again, there is no report without the efforts of our team and Andrea and Jen's team that brought us to this point. So I really want to thank them, thank everyone involved, and appreciate support members of council shown at committee and again today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Englai, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to take this opportunity to thank Chair Moffat and Vice Chair Menard, along with our staff at the committee meeting. In addition to what the chairs set out, there were a number of delegations, all very supportive of the path forward. And yes, it's going to be expensive, and yes, it's going to be challenging, but we have to be part of that puzzle. We have to take our place and reach out to the other levels of government and community partners. Sometimes it takes a little bit of money to generate even more money through federal and provincial programs to get things going. I'm very supportive of this project. I'm very supportive of, I know how hard the chair and the vice chair have worked on this along with staff. It's a complicated plan. It's a far-reaching plan over the next 30 years for the city, but it's absolutely a necessary plan. If we don't start doing something now, we're going to be too late. And lots of moving parts, but I feel quite confident with Chair Moffat leading the way that we're going to make real progress in this term of council and going forward in responding to these very real environmental needs in our city. So again, thank you very much, and I'll absolutely be supporting this project.
Great, thank you. Councillor Luby, I apologize. You had 52 seconds left, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate you checking that for me. A simple last question. I just think it's important to put on the record today, if we could, that as Councillor Meehan referenced, there's a quarter of the population that is not currently connected to the LRT system, and that is Canada and Barrhaven. And along with Orleans, we are the fastest growing parts of the city. And so I think it's very important to assure residents that when we're talking about a $57 billion plan here today, and we also have this STO project that is gaining momentum as a cross-border project, I think it's important. I'd like to hear assurances from the city manager and yourself that it is still the city's priority to ask the federal and provincial governments to fund what we are currently calling Phase 3.
I can give you a one-word answer. Yes, absolutely yes. And I thank you for raising that, Councillor. I'm just going to offer a couple of comments. Thanks to members of the committee for their hard work and heavy lifting, and members of the community who came out to support the project. It is, of course, a very ambitious project, and there's nothing wrong with aiming high. My mother used to say, aim high, there's plenty of room. This is spread out over a long period of time, 30 years. And I just wanted to give two examples, and Councillor Hubley brought up one of the examples. LRT, electric LRT, is our single biggest weapon against greenhouse gases in our city's toolbox. And once we get to Phase 2, which is under construction now, we'll see significant drops in GHGs. And of course, Phase 3 is the next council priority for transportation or transit projects that will serve the people of Barrhaven, as well as the people of Stittsville, and of course, Canada, all fast-growing parts of our city. Another example that I often use when people talk about, well, why are you spending money on this? How much is it going to cost? Is the LED light replacement program from Hydro, a partnership with the City of Ottawa and Hydro, where all of the lights, the street lights in the communities of Ottawa have been or are in the process of being replaced with LED lights, which not only saves us in terms of energy costs and greenhouse gases, but also saves us money. I think the payback time is approximately 7 years. So as a number of members of council, Councillor Menard, I believe, and Councillor Moffat and Egli and Brockington all raised the issue that, sometimes when you spend this money, there is a very positive return on investment. I think the LED program is a great tangible example to use with constituents who are asking about energy evolution. This is a great example, as was the process we did with Ottawa Community Housing in terms of retrofitting. We got federal and provincial money for energy efficient windows and doors and patios and so on. That there was a payback to the greater community because, of course, energy bills would go down, the quality of life of those people living in OCH communities would improve. So I encourage people to support this. This is not giving staff a blank check to go off and do whatever they want to do. Everything has to be checked by committee and by council and through various budget processes over the next 30 years. So on the report as presented. Carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, so disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority. Suite à donner des articles ratifiés par les comités en vertu de pouvoirs délégués. Carried. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Councillor Egli, seconded by Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Built Heritage Subcommittee, Report 16, Community and Protective Services Committee Report 14, Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Report 11, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending October 23rd, 2020, and summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of October 14, 2020 be received and adopted as amended.
Carried. Adopté.
Carried.
So motions of which notice have been previously given. Councillor Harder and Tierney, I believe Councillor Harder, you've withdrawn this motion. Is that correct?
Yes, with the explanation sent to colleagues yesterday.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. Councillor Suds has a motion, was given notice, seconded by Councillor Egli on the mask bylaw. Councillor Suds, please.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As everyone would know, earlier in the summer, we enacted the temporary mandatory mask bylaw, which required the wearing of masks on transit property and in enclosed public spaces, and that operators of such spaces post signage notifying of the mask requirements, provide hand sanitizer as well. The bylaw is temporary in nature, and it also contains a sunset clause, meaning that council is required to renew the bylaw if the need still exists to extend the bylaw's application beyond the sunset date based on public health advice as well. So later in the summer, we did, in addition to approve amendments, to the bylaw to include enclosed common areas of condominiums and multi-unit residential buildings, and designated unenclosed public spaces under delegated authority. Council extended the sunset date of the bylaw from August 26th to November 1st, and of course, November 1st is fast approaching. As a city, we do continue, of course, to have COVID present in the city, and the provincial government has identified Ottawa as one of 3 areas in the province needing greater restrictions for reopening. So bylaw and regulatory services has, since July 15th, handed out over 1,600 requests for service and issued 64 charges related to violations of the bylaw, most of which have been issued more recently, given our zero tolerance approach. So it is proposed that the bylaw remain in effect until the new year, and specifically until the day after the first regularly scheduled council meeting in 2021. So I'm happy to read out the motion if you'd like, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I think maybe just the therefore be it resolved. This is pretty straightforward. Go ahead.
Okay. Are we able to just put it up on the screen here? Terrific. So the therefore be it resolved that City Council approve the temporary mandatory mask bylaw 2020-186 as amended, remain in effect until 12:01 a.m. on the day after the first regularly scheduled meeting of Council in 2021, unless it is extended by Council.
Okay, thank you. We have some people who have questions or comments. Councillor Fleury.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the motion. Just from a procedural point of view, I wonder if, I get where we're going, but why don't we keep it in place until we revoke it? I wonder why we set a date like that. Is there a procedural reason we do it that way?
I asked that question of our solicitor at 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I suppose, because ultimately we either have to reinstate it or withdraw the motion. So we have to do some action either way, and we chose to be more proactive and set a date. I'm not sure if we're going to be, I suspect we'll probably have to extend that beyond the first meeting in January, given the state of COVID now. Mr. White, do you have any other comments to add on that?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think the inclusion of a sunset clause merely reinforced the fact that this was a temporary measure put in place for that purpose.
Anything else, Councillor Fleury? Les autres choses? Merci. Conseiller Tierney, s'il vous plaît. And I just see Tierney was re-signed with the Senators. Congratulations, Tim. Oh, it's not you.
Oh, geez. No, I could be the puck picker-upper. That's about it. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Fleury had the exact same question. I look forward to getting my Christmas mass put together for the holiday season. Thank you very much. Great,
thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Suds and seconded by Councillor Eglai, carried. Adopté. Merci. Councillor King has our next motion, an important one involving our Asian Canadian community, seconded by Councillor McKenney, please. Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wish fervently that I didn't have to bring forward this motion, but the reality is that racism exists in many forms and in all places. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has only reinforced and accelerated what we all know. Racism continues to impact our city. And to be clear, the motion before us today about anti-East Asian racism doesn't diminish the other forms of racism, that being anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism against Indigenous people, which have long existed in Canada. Increasing reports of instances of racism against people of Asian descent began to emerge early on in 2020 as COVID-19 began to take hold. Even before the declaration of a pandemic, Chinese and other Asian restaurants in our city saw drops in patrons. Businesses run by Asian Canadians reported instances of patrons questioning whether it was safe to be there, despite many of these people never having set foot in Wuhan. Accelerated, no doubt, by the extremist rhetoric in the United States, more overt acts of racism began to be reported throughout Canada. The Chinese-Canadian National Council for Social Justice, in conjunction with other groups with funding from Heritage Canada, has been collecting data about racist incidents across Canada. This community-led national collaboration of data collection is the first of its kind. In its report released in September, it cataloged 600 incidents reported since the onset of COVID-19. Worryingly, women are impacted most, reporting 60% of all incidents. The Angus Reid Institute surveyed 500 Canadians of Chinese ethnicity. In their report in June 2020, half of all respondents have been called names or insulted as a result of COVID-19, and a plurality, 43%, further say they have been threatened or intimidated. Statistics Canada's wider sample in September has indicated that 28% of participants in their surveys have reported experiencing discrimination during the pandemic, with women encountering this more than men. It is consistent with earlier reporting in May that demonstrated that 1 in 5 respondents identified as a visible minority had encountered harassment or attacks, double that of the rest of the population. What do these instances of hate look like? Name calling, spitting, harassment, and physical assault. Graffiti on businesses. Phrases such as, "You brought the virus here," and "Go back to where you came from." The Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Dr. Theresa Tam, had her ability and loyalty questioned by a member of Parliament simply because she is of Chinese descent. All of these instances serve to continue the perpetual foreigner myth that no matter how long you've been here, if you've been born in Canada, your family has been here for generations. It didn't matter anymore because of how you look. At its core, this is what racism is about. It is about judging someone purely by the appearance, by their appearance, by the color of their skin. Before anybody tells us that this didn't happen in Ottawa, it does. Latest statistics from Ottawa police indicate that there have been at least 14 instances this year of reported hate crimes due to someone being of East or Southeast Asian descent. This is a 600% increase on the year-to-date statistics, and the number of non-reported cases is likely much higher. While I understand the apprehension of some to report, the Ottawa Police has asked that all instances of hate crimes, regardless of how trivial they may seem, are reported. It builds a fuller picture of what is happening in the city and allows for proper resource allocation. Instances that have happened in Ottawa include a couple in a vehicle following Asian people around Nepean yelling racial slurs, obscenities, and swearing in May, spitting on the car of a man having a meal in a restaurant, or the incident at Dorito Center where the assailant stated that being forced to wear a mask made him want to, quote, kill Asians. I remind my colleagues that these are the incidents we hear of, and these are just recent examples. Long before these recent spate of hate research done by our friends at Somerset West Community Health Center in focus groups, Chinese seniors told us that people are racist and aggressive to them on public transit. Today's motion follows similar motions made by city councils in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. It echoes the call to action that our colleagues in Toronto have made to bring attention and the need to combat racism in the city. As community leaders, we have the obligation to set the tone for our city. We have the responsibility to take action and encourage all citizens of our city to be part of the solution. I ask my colleagues to join myself and Councillor McKinney in stating that we unequivocally denounce these instances of anti-East Asian racism and that we do not tolerate racism in any of its forms. In asking our city staff to launch a public information campaign, we're calling on every single citizen of Ottawa to actively be involved. If you witness these instances of racism against anyone, don't stand by. Be an ally. Colleagues, I encourage you to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. On the motion, Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank Councillor King for his work on this motion. The only request I would hope it would be a friendly amendment. We've heard from, probably each of us have heard from residents within our community, but we've also heard from the Japanese Community Association. I know I've heard from Korean residents that are experiencing this as well. So I'd like to see us say, perhaps instead of just limiting it to the East Asian community, that we say any visible minority based on the examples of what Councillor King just gave us. Would that be a friendly amendment?
I would be open to language of that effect.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor King.
Okay, so maybe we'll just ask the clerk to just reflect that that's a friendly motion amendment. Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much, and I wanted to say thank you to my colleagues for bringing this motion forward. I have to say I'm getting a little choked up about it because I'm hearing about firsthand experiences from my residents, including one who's the president of the Ottawa Asian Heritage Month Society, which was a celebration we went to last year and was wonderful when you saw the cultural variety there, and it was all different Asian groups. And here we are today with people showing hatred. It's something that just creeps in there, and it has to be called out. And I really, really appreciate this, and particularly bothered by the fact that women are a target. Frankly, there's evidence, and I'm very grateful that this is being brought forward because it's very necessary to call it out. So thank you to my colleagues and thank you to staff for their contribution on this.
Great. Thank you. Councillor McKinney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleague, Councillor King, for this motion. As a representative of the councillor, I represent an area of the city that includes Chinatown. It includes areas of the city where people settled who came here from Asian countries, from China, from Vietnam, from Korea, and I always point out that we would not have the downtown that we have today without those members of our community. We would not have the population that supports the parks we have, the businesses we have, the traditional main streets that we have, the recreation centers, everything that makes a downtown and hence a city strong and vibrant. So every time I have an opportunity to thank the Chinese community, the Vietnamese community, the Korean community, East Asian community, I always want to do so because we do owe them a debt of gratitude. And so to see this turn today to know what's happening in the city with the heightened racism against our neighbors, our friends, our business owners of East Asian descent is really heartbreaking, and it does harm to our entire city. So it's, I think that a unanimous show of support by this council to say that we don't tolerate it, that the incidents that we've heard about over the past several months are not tolerated, and that we are strong allies to our community members, our neighbors, and our friends of Asian and East Asian descent will go a long way to ensuring that we are supporting the very people who have made this such a strong and vibrant city. So thank you to Councillor King, and thank you to my colleagues for showing your support.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor DeRuse, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I want to thank actually Councillor King and Councillor McKinney for their initiative and for their motion. I know that this is very important for not only for the Asian community, like for every. The city of Ottawa is really diverse, and we do not accept comment like this in our beautiful city. I also want to thank Councillor King for accepting Councillor Hubley's friendly amendment, because I'm really happy to see that, and I want to thank all the councillors that they worked behind the scenes to make it happen. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So on the motion as amended, carried. Thank you. Next, Councillor Menard has a motion seconded by Councillor McKinney. I believe there's a replacement motion. Councillor Menard, if you could introduce the motion, explain the difference between the two motions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Will do. So I believe the motion should come up on screen here. I have it in front of me as well. And the reason for the changes is working closely with Chair Dean on the motion and some of the activities of the Ottawa Police Board just on Monday. So whereas our city, province, and country are currently dealing with continued instances of anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, systemic racism, including in our police services, and whereas there is widespread recognition that mental health calls can be addressed more effectively, reducing the criminalization of poverty, drug use, and mental illness, and whereas alternative models of community safety have been studied and implemented in other jurisdictions with success, and whereas a civilian-led community service strategy could supplement the OPS current mental health services while also enabling the Ottawa Police to significantly reduce the need to respond to mental health calls other than those calls that involve violence or criminality. And whereas the OPSB is supporting the proposed development of a comprehensive mental health strategy for the City of Ottawa, that it could include elements such as the embedding of a mental health professional in the 911 Communications Center, referral to calls to 311 and or 211 services, increased training for all members and community members involved in mental health related calls. And whereas the OPSB and OPS are committed to significant change in the delivery of mental health services and have identified the need to work with the broader community to achieve this change. And whereas the City of Ottawa's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan has identified mental health as a key priority and the city should play a role in advancing this work, therefore be it resolved that Council support the OPSB and OPS in their plan to develop a comprehensive mental health strategy to be implemented over the course of the next 3 years. And be it further resolved that Council support the OPSB and OPS's publicly stated intention to consult and work collaboratively with a broad range of community, municipal, and other stakeholders, including but not limited to Ottawa Public Health, Crime Prevention Ottawa, community and social service agencies, housing, homelessness, and advocacy organizations, and representation from Black, Indigenous, and racialized groups in the development of a comprehensive whole-of-city mental health strategy that reflects the OPS and OPSB's commitment to reconciliation and the United Nations declarations for the Decade of People of African Descent, And be it further resolved that Council support the OPS and OPSB in their intention to open up their consultations beyond organizational stakeholders to include the broader public. And be it further resolved that Council support the OPS and OPSB's stated intention to include in its mental health strategy consultations and corresponding report discussion of potential alternative models of community safety response, including those that allow for a non-police response when warranted. And so I thank Councillor Deans for working on this motion and the other information that came forward on Monday. I also believe Chief Slowly has been made aware of this motion as well. This replacement motion sees some revisions, and it really strengthens the motion. The motion affirms and clarifies the intention to move forward with important reforms, and this is City Council's opportunity to demonstrate support for that important work. We know there's appetite in the community for these changes. We know that over 2,000 people have now signed on to a petition calling for it. There's been gatherings, of course, outside City Hall, and people want to see that their City Council is supporting a process of meaningful change to these services in our city. So here's our chance to do that. I'll hand it back to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. I have a number of... Whoops, I think we have some echo there. There we go. I have a number of speakers on the motion. Questions and comments. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad my colleagues is working with the police board chair on this motion. But wouldn't this motion be best dealt with at the Ottawa Police Service Board, where the community member can come out and speak about it and support that position? I mean, it's good to have a tier right here, but all what you are doing is just requesting the police board and the police service to adopt this motion. So I think the right place, quite frankly, Mr. Mayor, this motion should go to the police board and invite the public to speak about it, and when come back after the police board receiving this or agreeing to this motion, then come back to us, and that would be the time for us as a council to support that position. But I think the public has the right to speak about this, not just have the motion. Even in front of me, it's almost two different motions. My colleague was reading a motion. It doesn't even is in a package we received the other day. So I believe I'm not sure if the chair would agree to it, but maybe should go to the police board. I think that the police board is the place to discuss this issue, not just let it pass through us and send it. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor. My understanding is, obviously, since we're passing this, we actually are sending it to the police board, and as you know better than most, they have that public delegation period at the beginning, and if this is on their agenda. So maybe we can just ensure, Councillor Menard, since it's your motion, that this motion be circulated to members of the Police Services Board. Is that agreeable?
Absolutely.
To ensure the public have an ability to speak to it at a future police board meeting, and I'll get Councillor Dean's concurrence on that as well. Councillor Menard?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just for a second, what this motion does is just support the work of the PSB and the OPS. It's asking council as representatives of the public to support the good work that the PSB and the OPS is doing. I've already circulated this motion to members of the service board. They're aware that council is addressing this today. I think it's absolutely appropriate that council address it today.
No, I have no problem addressing it today, but I think Councillor El-Shantiri's point is if Councillor Menard is amenable to ensuring that this be put on the agenda so that the public can speak to it at a future board meeting as well, just to have that public input. Councillor Menard, are you okay with that?
The intent, Mr. Mayor, appreciate the suggestion, is to bring in the public. The OPSB on Monday had some discussions about this that I participated in there, and the intent is to have public consultations, full public consultations on this motion. So that will inevitably occur.
Okay, so this motion will appear on their agenda then at a future meeting. I just want to make, I think Councillor El-Shantiri's point is the public have had no input in this resolution because it came directly to council, but if it goes to the Police Services Board at the public delegation period, public can speak to it, support it, and so on. So if you're agreeable, I think we'll just say that, and that this matter be placed on the agenda of a future Police Services Board meeting for public input. Is that agreeable?
Well, I think what we need to do is pass this motion here today to make sure that council supports the direction that we're heading in. And once we pass that motion, this will flow back where the public has an opportunity to speak, both as the police board and the public consultations that occur. But it's important we pass it today at council and that all councillors support this direction, given what's happening in our country and around the world. So I would urge us to pass this today, Mr. Mayor.
So I didn't hear that.
Mayor, if it's helpful, I would be happy to put this as an information item on the Police Services Board agenda so that the members of the public know that council supports the work the Police Services Board is doing, and if anyone wants to come and speak about it, they'd be welcome to do so.
Okay, so that's in line with what I had written down here, that this item be placed on a future Sorry, Councillor Elshanair, just let me finish. That this item be placed on a future PSB board meeting for public consultation. Is that okay, Councillor Deans?
For information.
Yeah, it is for information because it's saying that council supports the work of the PSB, but yes, I'll put it on, so if anybody wants to come and talk about it, they can.
Okay, so I've just added for information. Okay, thank you, Councillor McKenney. Councillor El-Shantiri, anything else?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm good with that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll add that on there. You got that? I wrote it down. Yeah. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I commented in June at Ottawa Police Services Board meeting that the police service should work more to enhance mental health crisis services, especially concerning the coordination of crisis response, which should primarily focus on intervention with health professionals rather than relying on sworn officers. This is why I'm pleased that the proposed mental health crisis response strategy in the proposed 2021 police budget will look towards community and social service organizations to take the primary lead to address mental health response. At the Police Services Board meeting held just this Monday, Chief Slowly acknowledged that a different model is required to transition current crisis response options to primarily involve professional mental health practitioners in frontline response. I believe that the best type of response detasks sworn officers and the police service from being the key responder. Such an approach would shift mental health crisis response to primarily involve professionals that can better assist individuals experiencing a mental health or addictions-related crisis. As the police service moves towards this change, the City of Ottawa also needs to allocate appropriate resources to address emergency mental health response. Our city needs to fund new mobile mental health crisis intervention programs so that we do not primarily need to rely on the police service to respond to people in crisis. Ottawa should emulate cities in the United States and Europe that have developed mental health crisis assistance models that work independently. Under such an approach, medical professionals and crisis worker teams provide first aid in cases of urgent psychological crisis. They assess, refer, advocate, and even transport people in crisis to other service providers where they can get additional support. I believe only this approach can serve to reduce the role of police when they encounter people who suffer from mental health challenges and thereby de-escalate scenarios which could result in police violence. While I applaud Chief Slowly for proposing changes to policing concerning mental health in Ottawa, community members also want to ensure that a meaningful public consultation process concerning this strategy emerges so that they can have their say. It is therefore essential that we seek the widest possible public engagement in this effort to bring together community members along with the broadest range of social agencies and other stakeholders, especially from racialized and Indigenous communities, so that we can develop a whole of city strategy, not just a police strategy. As a consequence, such a process should have the police as a partner, but consultation should not be led by the police. As we move towards systemic change, we must move together as a community, especially if we intend to build trust and mutual understanding within our community in the aftermath of the grief, trauma, and suffering that the Black, Somali, and Muslim communities have experienced, along with the city at large. I thank Councillors Menard and McKenney for moving this motion, and I intend to support it today. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Cloutier, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to Councillor Menard, whom I saw in the hallway this morning, and Councillor McKenney for working with Chair Deans on the revised motion. I was reassured with what was shared by Chair Deans and Chief Slowly and by Deputy Bell at Monday's Police Services Board meeting. This motion is more effective, it's more nuanced, and I appreciate the changes that have been made from the previous version that we got on October 14th. It speaks well what the city is doing and keeps the public in the loop with what we're doing and what to expect. I like the motion. La motion aujourd'hui reflète ce qu'on entend.
The motion reflects what we hear in the community, what we've been hearing for months, and from our residents here and people around the world regarding the police and the justice and systemic racism.
Ottawa, around the world, with respect to policing and fundamental justice, systematic racism. It speaks to what we heard just outside City Hall this morning. I like Councillor King, I too will be supporting the motion. I want to take a moment to remind us and remind myself that when we sit around this table to discuss things like alternative policing and defunding the police and the spirit and the objective of what that movement is, and when we talk about reconciliation, we have an obligation to the communities directly affected by those conversations. Those communities that some have a deep mistrust for the existing police institution and a mistrust of their city councils sometimes also. It's an important opportunity and we need to build the strategy. And Chief Slowly said on Monday that it's not an OPS strategy, it's a community strategy. It's a strategy that will transcend a lot of services here at the city. Councillor Sudd's department and committee and others, and many departments here in the city in Ottawa. The community partnership and dialogue is not just appropriate or desirable or beneficial. It's absolutely essential. It's absolutely fundamental for this issue. And it involves a lot of community partnerships in many organizations here in the city and outside of our city government, with our service providers, with our community associations, with individuals. To what Councillor Eglai said, it needs to be discussed at Police Services Board, but we also need to reach out. And so I encourage Police Services Board, Ottawa Police, to involve, to exchange with Black, Indigenous, and people of color collectives and organizations now, not a year from now, so that we could carve out a plan and a process to move forward. And involving them will, of course, build trust and transparency and lend itself to a better outcome that's built by and for our community members. So we as elected officials, with our extraordinary privilege, need to continue to have those difficult conversations with our communities to understand the lived experience, further deepen the lived experience as individual and in our communities, to get on to the path forward, how we build our social infrastructure to be robust and responsive to the needs of our residents. So I will support the motion. I hope the motion passes unanimously so that we can continue on that path forward. Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief. Much of the sentiment that I share has already been stated this morning, and I do thank my colleagues for that. I do want, though, to take the opportunity to thank J4A, Justice for Abdi Lachman, organizations like Wabano who support our Indigenous communities, COWI, City for All Women Initiative, and all organizations that work on the ground, grassroots, to ensure that we are responding to their needs. As my colleague, Councillor Cloutier, just pointed out, rightfully so, we come from around this table on the Zoom screen, come from a place of privilege, and we need to understand what the needs are, what what people are calling for, what the interventions that they want. And it's, in the end, I think we have to remember that this is a discussion about the health needs in our community and separating health from police force. If today I wasn't feeling well and I ran out into the street calling for help and disrupted someone and they called bylaw on me, I'm guessing you would still treat me for my health issue. And that's what we have to ensure when somebody is having a health crisis, whether that's as a result of poverty or homelessness or mental unwellness, that's how it's treated. And it's going to take time, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to take money. And I think we also have to recognize that as a city, we have not kept up our part of the bargain in terms of funding community and social services, funding day programs, funding health services, funding the types of services, even recreation services that people need, that our communities need to stay well, to stay housed, to stay out of poverty, to be able to approach their day-to-day lives in a healthy way. And we know that the consequences of that are systemic. They affect racialized communities at a much greater proportion than they do others. And they affect our Indigenous community at a far greater proportion than any other. So we have our work to do too. We have to remember that going into the budget. We have a community well-being and safety plan that needs funding, just not words. We need to put a funding attached to it. So I look forward to the ongoing consultation. Thank you to Councillor Deans, Chair of Police Services Board, for all of the work that we've been able to do in the past week to ensure that we got to a place where I think we all really believe that we are going to help communities inform us what they need so that we can move ahead and make real differences in how we respond to them. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Councillor Menard, and I want to thank and Councillor McKenney for the motion, but also for working cooperatively with Chair Deans on this. The important part is that we show the cooperation and and a certain amount of trust to show that we get that OPS is signaling a change of direction, and it's a very positive change of direction, and it's one that we wanted. I listened on Monday evening to the board meeting, and I felt that it was a very big step, and that there's commitment behind it. I want to thank all the council for this because this is a signal that we're working together, but we're also showing trust and support that a direction is being taken. So I want to thank everyone for doing that, and I will be supporting this motion.
All right, thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. I would also just like to thank Councillors Menard, McKenney, and Deans for giving us the opportunity to support this today. 4 years ago in Hintonburg, my neighborhood, when Abdirahman Abdi died, that was a traumatic experience for the Black and Somali and Hintonburg community as a whole. And last week, regardless of your feelings on the verdict, I know that everybody around this table sympathizes with and understands the re-traumatization that occurred with the verdict. The relationship between police and council is a difficult one to explain to people. But we have the opportunity to exercise our moral suasion, and we have the opportunity to use our voice. I have been learning for the last 4 years a lot about courage from the Justice for Adjournment Coalition. And I hope today that we as a council will show that courage in using our voice and the moral suasion that we have to influence some positive change, both from that events that have occurred subsequently, and the kinds of tragedies that we're seeing around the world. We can't fix as city council all the problems that exist today with systemic racism within police and within so many other organizations, but we can indicate clearly to our police force that we support their efforts to address at least this part of it. And so I am grateful to Councillors Menard and McKenney and Deans for giving us the opportunity to show courage today in describing a better way forward that addresses the issues that have been first and foremost in the minds of so many in our community for the last 4 years. I hope that we will see a unanimous support like Councillor Cloutier today with this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Engelai, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. You know, I've been sitting around this table live and virtually now for 10 years or so, and I have to say this motion and this discussion is reminding me of how we can get things done at council, collaboratively, cooperatively, different councillors from different backgrounds, different perspectives, sitting down, identifying a problem, focusing on how we can fix it. Focusing on who our city partners are with OPS and OPH and all the other organizations. So I'm very heartened by the discussion that we're having this morning. And I think the only way to make it better is when you call for the vote, each and every one of us unanimously accepts this particular initiative and direction. And I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, this is one of those motions where we ask for yeas and nays and make it very clear on the record where we all are on this particular issue. Thank you.
Yeah, just to be very clear, though, we cannot direct the police board, so these are suggestions. So we want to make sure we follow the proper process. Councillor Deans, please. Councillor Deans, you're on mute.
Good point. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And let me start by acknowledging that today is the first anniversary of Chief Peter Slowly taking the reins of Ottawa Police. And I want to take this opportunity to personally thank him for his outstanding leadership over the last year and moving the yardstick forward at Ottawa Police. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Councillors McKenney and Menard for the motion that you see here today, and all of Council, including you, Mr. Mayor, for the work that all of us together have put into getting this motion where it is today. What this motion says to me is that City Council fully supports the work that the Police Services Board is doing with OPS in driving a change agenda. And I think that's a very, very important message for this community to hear, that we recognize the need for change. We have heard the calls for change. We want better outcomes in this city, and we are going to work as collaboratively and as hard as we can as a city and a police board to bring about better outcomes in the future. You know, it's on all of us as a community. This is not just a police issue. In fact, many of the calls that we see coming into police that involve mental health calls should never get there. We should be dealing with the upstream issues. The province should be funding their community safety and well-being plan. They should be sending more money and supports for mental health. We should be funding our poverty agenda and our homelessness strategy, because homelessness, poverty, addiction issues, mental health issues, we should be supporting those so that they don't end up in police outcomes at the end. That's the failure. So I think as a city, we all recognize there is a lot of work to do, that we can't do it alone. We need to do it collaboratively. We need to be open to listening to the experts, to organizations, and to individuals in this community so that we can have a truly made in Ottawa solution that will be the best for this city that we can be. The Police Services Board is ready to adjust the sails. We are ready to move forward and make a huge difference. And I have to tell you that City Council's unanimous support for the work the board is doing is very uplifting to all of us. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your support today. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much, councillors, to all who spoke and all members of council for their participation, and particularly pleased that this motion is very much aligned with Chief Slowly's vision on what has to be done. Also, he's been very clear that he wants to work collaboratively with us from a financial point of view, of course, which is important, and the board's alignment with the chief, which is aligned with the city, and ultimately the greater community is a very positive thing. I also want to thank my Chief of Staff, Sir Jarpin, as well as Robin Guest, Director Policy, who has the police file in my office, for their work with Councillor Deans, and to also thank Councillors Menard and McKenney for bringing forward and being open to changes to make the motion, I think, stronger and better and more acceptable to all members of council. So yeas and nays have been called on the motion, please.
Councillor Luloff?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Suds?
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor McKenney?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Egley?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli? Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor Kavanagh?
Yes.
Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
Oui.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
Oui.
Councillor Gower?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
Yes.
Councillor King?
Yes.
Councillor Menard?
Yes.
Councillor Harder?
Yes.
Councillor Meehan?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
23 yeas.
Thank you. Merci. Next is a motion by Councillor Tierney, seconded by myself. And before I ask Councillor Tierney to speak to this item, Councillor was just, I believe, yesterday re-elected for his 8th consecutive term as the chair of the Ontario Caucus of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So, Councillor Tierney, congratulations, and the floor is yours to introduce this motion.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just talk about the motion briefly. As you know, with the pandemic, we were originally scheduled for 2023, but like everything in this world, everything is shifting. And this is a motion that would not only see great tourism coming to our city, but also, and I think it's very timely, the debate we had today about climate and looking for those federal funds, the importance of having over 2,000 member municipalities from across the country in our city of Ottawa spending their money, but also getting to mingle with the federal elected representatives that all come to this city to work. So therefore, be resolved that the council approve this motion as a measure that the city support being the host city for 2025 for the FCM Annual General Conference and Trade Show. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Any questions on the motion? Carried. Adopté. Merci. Okay. Now we're on to a number of motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Motion exigeant la suspension des règles de procédure. Often I'm asked by members of the public, what are these motions? They're often time sensitive, and that's why we have to suspend the rule because there's a time element to them. So first is Councillor Brockington and Kavanagh with promotion of outdoor recreational activities. Obviously, winter is soon before us. We saw some snow today. So on suspension of the rules, carried? Carried. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you again, Mayor, and good morning to colleagues. Yes, there's a motion being put forward by myself, seconded by Councillor Kavanagh, regarding the promotion of outdoor recreational winter activities. Just a brief introduction. We certainly know the challenges that COVID has presented our city over the last 8 months. One of them, of course, are the mental health challenges that is associated with this, mild, moderate, and more challenging for many people. Winter has a number of challenges. A lot of people spend more time indoors, and that is not necessarily a healthy proposition for a lot of people. We have a lot of great amenities in the city, outdoor amenities in the city. The City of Ottawa certainly embraces winter, and we have a lot of organized and unorganized activities that people can take part in. So the goal of this motion, working with communication staff, Parks and Recreation, even Ottawa Health in collaboration, is to, one, emphasize the benefits, both physical and for one's mental health, of being actively engaged outside during the winter, let alone every other season. And secondly, help promote and make the public aware of what amenities in our great city exist. And so I'm not going to read the motion, Mayor. I'll just read the therefore clauses to make it faster for everyone. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ottawa, one, publicly communicate in collaboration with OPH the physical and psychological merits of outdoor recreational winter activities up to the end of the winter season, March 31st. Two, publicly communicate a list of outdoor recreational winter activities available in Ottawa up to the end of the winter, including the locations that may include but not be limited to skiing and snowshoeing trails, outdoor community rinks, walking, hiking trails, and toboggan hills. Three, publicly identify associations and or community partners that govern or oversee snowmobile trails and ice fishing locations. And be it further resolved that the Mayor write to the CEO of the NCC to affirm council support for the Rideau Canal Skateway 2021 season. And so I think this is fairly clear and straightforward, and I'll end my introduction there.
Great, thank you. And I think we should challenge Councillor Brockington and Councillor Kavanagh to a cross-country ski race on the Sir John A. Macdonald pathway, and I know where I'm going to put my money. Councillor Kavanagh, next to you. Sorry, Riley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'll challenge Councillor Fleury too. I need a little bit of motivation here. Thank you very much. Last year, we did a pilot project in Bay Ward of the Britannia Winter Trails, and it was just before COVID hit. And I can tell you that just that little project, for only 5 weeks, got a lot of seniors outside. And you could see that it's like the perfect physical distancing activity where they can get outside, get a little fresh air, and then, they're not near anyone. And this is really important. I appreciate that Ottawa Public Health promotes physical activity. It's important to do it right with physical distancing. And I want to thank my colleague, Councillor Brockington, for bringing this forward. This is really important. We got to get through this winter and stay healthy. And also mental health is a very important part of this. This isn't just about physical health. We need to get out of it, but we have to follow the rules. So thank you very, very much, and I hope you'll support it.
Okay, thank you. On the motion, carried. Adopté. Thank you. Carried. Next motion requiring suspension of the rules is by Councillor Kavanagh. seconded by Councillor Deans on the end gender-based violence activism, 16 days of activism. On suspension, carried. Adopté? Carried, okay. Councillor Kavanagh, if you want to introduce maybe just some of the therefore be it resolved or speak to the whole item, your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'll let the councillors read the whereases, but I would ask them to do read them because they're all very, very important. It's about recognizing that violence against women is still very prevalent. We have particular concerns right now with COVID-19 and the fact that it's something that is more hidden, and we want to shine a light on the fact that this still exists. We know it exists, and the first step is to recognize that. This has been going on for a long time. I want to give a special thank you to the Grandmothers Advocacy Network, who got this started 5 years ago, where they asked us to work as another city on a UN motion of shining the light on violence against women. And they worked hard to get attention on this. And I want to give a special thank you to Hydro Ottawa and to Bryce Conrad for the support that they are giving on this. This is fantastic. It's a wonderful gesture. So I appreciate their support. It's very appropriate, light, and it's an orange light, and it's something that is being done in other countries. So I'm glad that Ottawa is looking to join in. And Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that this is going to declare 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence in the city of Ottawa. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. On the motion, carried. Adopté. Merci. The next motion requiring suspension is Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor El Shantiri with respect to patios and building fees for winter tent structures and so on. On suspension, carried. Councillor Carter, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my colleague, Councillor El Shantiri, and I are happy to support this initiative that came from your staff, who's been working hard with the industry, Matt Gravel. So I want to give a shout out to Matt. This would extend the ability to the Economic Partners Task Force extension to November 15th of what we've already approved on October the 14th should help restaurants get over the current 28-day closure of indoor dining. And so when we approve that on October 14th, we also continue to work with the patio operators to encourage cafe seating options as an alternative option to sidewalk patios and street side spots. So therefore, be resolved that Council approves that the building permit fees required to have a patio tent structure be waived from October 9th to December 31st to allow restaurants to provide alternative dining arrangements to continue to meet physical distance requirements.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And I know, Councillor Tierney, as this is part of your mandate, you've been working on this file as well. I appreciate that, along with Councillor Dudas and Councillor El Shantiri at the Economic Partners table. So on the motion, Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the motion. I'll certainly be supportive. I just want to bring, as you know, Councillor McKenney and I have 90% of the right-of-way patios in Ottawa, and I want to thank Steve Willis and his entire team for being responsive and flexible during the economic recovery for our important local business community. Want to raise one point. Every time we talk about patios, an individual business owner doesn't necessarily know what we talk about because they might have a private patio on a parking lot or on their own land. So I would hope that we would bring a little more clarity on our motions to speak to if we're influencing city sidewalk patio versus or street patio versus parking lot and private patios. I know the intent is certainly there and it's positive, but I want you to know that every time we speak to it, the BIAs and our offices do get questions on how those apply separately to the private patios.
Thank you. Councillor El-Shantiri.
Mr. Mayor, I did see Mr. Willis who had a comment.
Oops, sorry, I didn't think Steve was here. Steve?
Well, Mr. Mayor, just to respond to Councillor's question, this waiver applies to all tents in all situations, public and private lands.
Right, thank you. Councillor El-Shantiri.
I was just going to answer Councillor Fleury with the same answer, Mr. Mayor, but I would encourage all patio owners, Mr. Mayor, they should reach out to our staff and have that dialogue because that's helpful to make sure we keep the roads open and safe and we help them to do the right thing. But I mean, Mr. Willis answered the Councillor's question. Thank you. And I hope we'll get your support on the motion.
Great, thank you. Councillor, that's all on the motion. Carried. Thank you.
Carried.
Next is a motion by Councillor Harder and seconded by Councillor Kitts. Congratulations, Councillor Kitts. This is your first seconding, and then you have your first motion right after this. So, Councillor Harder, on suspension, rather. Delegation of authority.
Carried.
Carried. Councillor Harder, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think that there's been a few times in this term that I've asked for this exemption. It's part lot control exemption, delegation of authority, and it has to do with homes for new owners being registered. And when there is a hiccup in time with our council meetings not being on an every 2-week rotation, it comes up. I'll be probably talking about this in December, certainly in the summer. And now, because we have canceled the November 12th meeting of council, there are a couple that we know of, and there may be a few more, where delegation of authority needs to be given to our acting director of planning, which we approved that process, I think, earlier this year or late last year. So this would allow the director of planning to, with the concurrence of the local councillor, who in this case, the two that we know is myself and Councillor Kitts, to convey the title in the new homes to the new owners. So it's very important, and but it really is kind of,
okay, great.
necessary to do it when we need to, but when we don't, we don't. Thank you.
Okay, so on the motion, carried. Adopté. Merci. Next, the final motion that requires suspension of the rules is by Councillor Kitts, seconded by Councillor Harder, with respect to a Committee of Adjustment application for 2128 Trim Road. On suspension, carried.
Carried.
Councillor Kitts, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So very briefly, a request has been received to proceed with a minor variance for the multi-residential block in Phase 2 of the Provence-Orléans subdivision, 2128 Trim Road. It is staff-supported, and a timely direction from council is needed. So I'll skip ahead. Therefore, be it resolved that council approve that pursuant to Section 45 of the Planning Act, an application to the Committee of Adjustment be permitted in respect to the property at 2128 Trim Road for a minor variance associated with the proposed development, limited to the location of parking spaces permitted in a front yard as per Section 109(3)AI of bylaw 2008-250 as amended, and be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act.
This could be a close vote, Catherine, so thank you very much. Councillor Leeper has a question.
Thanks. Congratulations, Catherine, on your first motion. Just wondering, is this necessitated because it's within a certain time limit from the OPA?
Yes, it's, let me just see here. So it is because the zoning bylaw amendment, you've caught me off guard here.
I think if I could just step...
jump in, but it's the time limit. It's within the 2 years.
Okay.
And so the direction from council is needed in order to proceed with the Committee of Adjustment application.
Perfect. It's the time limit thing. You will have my strong support. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. On the motion? Carried?
Carried.
Thank you.
Carried.
Okay, next, notice of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Avis de motion par à réunion subséquente. Councillor Fleury and Eglai. Councillor Fleury, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is regarding renovictions. I don't know if it's on the screen. I don't know if the clerk can put it on the screen. Yes, thank you. Whereas on January 29th, 2020, City Council unanimously endorsed a resolution that declared an affordable housing and homelessness crisis and emergency. And whereas on July 21st, 2020, royal assent was given to Bill 184, being the Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Community Housing Act 2020, which the provincial government stated would seek to end renovictions, those evictions that occur when a landlord undertakes renovations to a rental property and then replaces the evicted tenants with those who would pay higher rents after the renovations are completed. And whereas on October 15, 2020, the Community Protective Services Committee unanimously recommended that Council request that the Mayor write to the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing requesting that the provincial government immediately restrict all residential rental evictions except in the cases of threats to public safety and maintain this moratorium on evictions until the COVID-19 pandemic is effectively contained. Therefore, be it resolved that staff prepare a report for consideration by committee and council that would outline all of the municipal tools available to the City of Ottawa to prevent or prohibit such evictions in the City of Ottawa, including a review of any bylaws, policies, and programs that may be used by other municipalities in the effort to prevent the further loss of affordable units.
Great, thank you. We'll deal with that at the next meeting. Next notice of motion is by Councillor McKenney and seconded by Councillor Leeper. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just notice of motion for demolition control. I'll just read the therefore be it resolved, although that's long, but since we are on Zoom.
I think maybe just give the address so the public knows, and then that'll be debated in full at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, so it's just demolition control for 247, 249, 261, 263, 267 Rochester Street and 27 Balsam Street.
Okay, thank you. We'll deal with that at our next meeting. Next notice of motion is also by Councillor Leeper, seconded by Councillor McKenney. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Since April, the province's emergency regulations to deal with COVID have allowed construction to begin at 6 a.m. on construction projects. That's 7 days a week. We know that a motion is probably coming forward at Queen's Park in the next few weeks to ask the province to give cities control of the noise bylaw back to cities. I think most people are aware normally it's only allowed starting at 7 a.m. with a 9 a.m. start on weekends. So I'm asking in the next meeting, therefore be it resolved that Council direct the Mayor to write to Premier Ford and Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister Stephen Clark requesting that control of construction hours revert to the control of municipalities.
Great, thank you. I'm going to be very busy. I'm going to be a busy letter writer, I noticed, after this meeting, so thank you for that. Next is motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Councillor Eglai, please, seconded by Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings, be read and passed.
Carried. Confirmation bylaw. Councillor Eglai, please.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of October the 28th, 2020.
Carried. We've received no inquiries. I do want to congratulate Councillor Luloff, who launched the Veterans Task Force yesterday with a great Zoom conference, and we wish him the very best as he continues to work for veterans, particularly those veterans who are homeless and seeking employment and greater opportunities in our community. So I appreciate that. Councillor Eglai, adjournment, please.
That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of October 28th, 2020 be adjourned.
Carried. And the media availability will begin at 12:20 in 10 minutes. Thank you. Merci. Meeting adjourned.